Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to dive into a stunning near-death experience full of profound revelations. Our protagonist, Emmeline Hawthorne, encountered Jesus on her spiritual journey and received a powerful message about Franklin Graham and true faith. Get ready for a story full of twists and teachings that promise to challenge everything we know about spirituality. But before we start, leave us in the comments from which city you're watching us from, and take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, so you don't miss any content like this. My name is Emmeline Hawthorne, and I decided to share something that completely changed my life. I'm not a writer nor a speaker. I'm just an ordinary person who went through an extraordinary experience. I'm 60 years old and I live in Charlottesville and Virginia with my husband Tom in a simple house, like that with a white fence in front and a garden that I take care of with great care. I always say that this garden is like our life. It needs constant care to flourish. We have been married for over 30 years and have 3 wonderful children. When I look back, I see that we built a life that many would call perfect. But do you know when you feel like something is missing? That's exactly how I felt, even though I had everything I ever wanted. I come from a traditional Christian family. My parents were very dedicated to the church and raised me following these values. As a young man, I attended every religious event, Sunday school, youth group, choir, you know the drill. Faith was a natural part of my life, like breathing, but things were changing little by little. First it was college, then marriage, then children. Life became increasingly busy, and without realizing it, I was moving away from that faith that was once so important to me. Not that I had stopped believing, but religion had become something more automatic. I still went to church from time to time, but it was more out of habit than true connection. Routine took over my life. I woke up early, took care of the house, took care of the children, went shopping, prepared dinner, you know the story. And so the years passed, one after another, without me realizing that that flame of faith, which had once been so strong, was practically extinguished. But everything changed a few months ago. It was something so intense and transformative that I still have trouble finding the right words to describe it. When people ask me about what happened, I always say it's like trying to explain colors to someone who's never seen before. You can use all the words in the world, but you still won't be able to convey the full experience. What I am going to tell you now is not an invented or exaggerated story. That's exactly what I experienced, in the most honest way I can relate. I know this may seem hard to believe. I would have doubts myself if someone told me something like that before I went through all this. But here I am, sharing my experience, not to convince anyone, but because I feel it's important to share what I've learned. It all started with pain. At first it was just a discomfort in my stomach that came and went. You know when you think, oh, it must be something I ate, and move on. It went on like this for a few weeks, until the pain started to get more frequent and stronger. Tom insisted that I see a doctor, and I ended up agreeing, more to reassure him than because I really thought it was necessary. After some tests, the diagnosis came, gallstones. The doctor explained that it was common, especially in people my age, and that surgery to remove them was a routine procedure. Mrs. Hawthorne, he said, it's a simple surgery. You come in the morning and you're home in the afternoon. I remember thinking that it was exaggerated to have surgery because of some pebbles, but I ended up accepting it. We scheduled the surgery for a Tuesday. The day before, I followed all the instructions. I didn't eat anything after 10 p.m. I took the medicine the doctor prescribed, and I tried to sleep early. Tom was more nervous than me, checking several times that we had separated everything we needed to take to the hospital. Our oldest son even joked that his dad needed a tranquilizer more than I did. On the morning of the surgery, we arrived at the hospital very early. I went through the entire admission process, put on the hospital gown, the one that always makes us a little embarrassed, and went to the room to wait. The nurse came, checked my vitals and said everything was normal. I remember that she was very friendly and tried to keep me calm, talking about everyday things. At around 9 a.m. to us, they took me to the operating room. The anesthetist explained the entire procedure and said that I would start to feel sleepy within a few seconds after he applied the anesthesia. The last thing I remember before blacking out was his face counting 1, 2, 3. As the medication began to take effect, the surgery itself went well, from what I was told afterwards. The problem started when I was in the recovery room. I started to feel a strange itch all over my body. At first, I thought it was normal, maybe an effect of the anesthesia, but the itching grew and soon I felt my chest tighten as if someone was sitting on top of it. I tried to tell the nurse, but my voice wasn't coming out right. I remember hearing an alarm going off and several people running towards me. The last thing I registered was Tom's worried face as he ran into the room, and then everything went dark. That's when my journey to another place began, an experience that would forever change my way of seeing life and death. It's hard to explain exactly how it happened, but suddenly I wasn't in that recovery room anymore. I mean, my body was, but I wasn't. It was as if I had floated upward, very slowly, like a soap bubble rising in the air. From up there, I could see everything that was happening below. It's strange to say this, but I could see perfectly even without using my physical eyes. I watched as the doctor shouted, "Code Blue," and the team started working on me frantically. Tom was leaning against the wall, his face pale as paper, as a nurse tried to convince him to wait outside. But do you know what is most surprising? I didn't feel afraid, none. It was as if I was watching a movie scene that had nothing to do with me. I could hear everything they said too. Pressure falling. Give epinephrine. Start compressions. It was as if my senses were sharper than ever. I noticed details I wouldn't normally notice, like the clock on the wall showing 11:47, the crooked badge of one of the nurses, even the sound of the medical staff's shoes on the hospital floor. And there was this feeling, how can I explain it? It was a peace so deep, so complete, that nothing in the world compares. All the fears, the worries, the pains, all of it just disappeared. It was like I had finally dropped a huge weight I didn't even know I was carrying. As I watched the scene below, I began to notice a soft light around me. At first it was just a faint glow, like an early sunrise, but it became stronger, more welcoming. It wasn't a light that hurt your eyes. In fact, looking at it was comforting, like hugging someone you love very much. It was then that I realized I wasn't alone. There was a presence there with me, something I couldn't see clearly, but I could feel. It was as if someone was wrapping me in a hug made of pure love. There is no word in any language that can describe that love. It was unconditional, infinite, perfect. At that moment, all the questions that had always tormented me, about the meaning of life, about why things happen the way they do, seemed to have an answer. Not that I could explain these answers in words, but I just knew, understood everything, with a clarity I had never experienced before. And then, the light started to get more intense, inviting me to go further. I knew I had a choice to make. I could move toward that wonderful light or return to my body, to my earthly life. But before I could decide, something extraordinary happened, something that would completely change my understanding of everything. It was then that he appeared. Jesus was there before me. And when I say that, I'm not talking about an impression or a vague sensation. It was himself, as real as you are reading this now. His presence was so strong, so alive, that it made the peace I already felt even deeper. The love that emanated from him was something that transcends any human description. His eyes, his eyes were like two wells of infinite compassion. When he looked at me, I felt like I was seeing my entire life at once, every joy, every sadness, every good and bad moment. But there was no judgment in that look, just understanding and love. A love so pure and intense that it hurt, but in a good way, like when you look straight at the sun. The most interesting thing is that we didn't need to use words to communicate. It was as if our thoughts connected directly, in a form of communication much deeper and clearer than any conversation I had ever had. I could understand exactly what he wanted to say to me, and he perfectly understood everything that was going through my mind. Jesus showed me that it was not my time to leave yet. There were more things I needed to do, more love I needed to share. But you have a mission, was what I understood, not with words, but with a certainty that came straight to my heart. It wasn't a grandiose mission to change the world, but something simpler and, at the same time, equally important, helping the people around me rediscover true love. In that moment, I saw how far I had strayed from the real essence of faith over the years. It wasn't about rituals, rules, or attending church. It was about love, pure and simple. Jesus showed me how sometimes we make things so complicated, create so many barriers and divisions, when really it all comes down to loving one another. I remember feeling a deep sadness when I realized how much time I had wasted on things that weren't really important. But even this sadness was enveloped by the love that emanated from him. It was as if Jesus was saying to me, "The past doesn't matter. What matters is what you do from now on." It was a moment of absolute clarity, All those doubts I had about faith, about the meaning of life, about what happens after death, everything became crystal clear. Not that I received all the answers, but I understood that some questions only exist because we try to understand the divine with our limited human mind. And then, gently, Jesus began to show me more things I needed to understand before I came back. It was as if we were about to begin a journey of discovery, where each revelation would be more surprising than the last. Jesus began to show me things about our modern faith that deeply touched me. It was like watching a movie, but instead of just seeing, I could feel every emotion, every nuance of what was being shown. I saw packed churches, people singing and praying, but I also noticed something I had never noticed before. How sometimes we get lost in the midst of so many rules and interpretations. I saw Franklin Graham and other religious leaders I knew. There was no condemnation in what Jesus showed me, just a kind of loving sadness. He made me understand that many of these leaders started out with good intentions, truly wanting to serve God, but gradually became carried away by the power and influence they gained. It was as if I could see through layers and layers of human interpretations that had been accumulating over Jesus' original message. I saw how we turned something so simple, loving God and our neighbors, into a complex set of rules and doctrines. Jesus showed me that it didn't have to be this way, that his message was always about unconditional love, not power or control. I realized how often we use religion to judge others, to feel superior or closer to God, when in fact this only takes us further away from the true meaning of faith. Jesus showed me that he never wanted to create divisions between people. Those divisions are our creations. One of the most impactful things I learned was the simplicity of true faith. No elaborate rituals or deep theological knowledge are needed to connect with God. Jesus showed me that a simple prayer said sincerely has more value than 1,000 memorized prayers said without feeling. I also understood how sometimes we use religion as a kind of shield, a way to protect ourselves from the world and our own insecurities. Jesus showed me that true faith does not isolate us from the world. It gives us strength to face it with love and compassion. I saw people being attracted to messages that appealed more to fear and ego than to love. It was painful to see how we sometimes distort Jesus' teachings to fit our own agendas and prejudices. But even as Jesus showed these difficult truths, he did so with so much love and compassion that it was impossible not to feel touched and transformed. And then, with infinite kindness, Jesus made me understand that he was not showing me these things so that I would judge or condemn anyone, but so that I could help others rediscover the simplicity and beauty of divine love. It was not a mission to convert people, but to show through my own example what it is like to truly live in love. What happened next is something that still makes me shudder just remembering it. Suddenly, all that light and love that surrounded me disappeared, and I found myself in a completely different place. It wasn't like the movies, with fire and demons. It was so much worse, because it was real and deeply lonely. It was a place of total absence of light, of love, of hope. Imagine the deepest emptiness. You can multiply it by 1,000, and it still won't come close to what I felt. It wasn't physical darkness, like when you turn off the light in your room. It was a darkness that penetrated the soul, that made you feel every mistake, every moment you chose to walk away from love. The people I met in this place were not being tortured by any evil being. They were torturing themselves with their own regrets and remorse. I saw people who had everything in material life, but who had completely closed themselves off from love. Others who spent their entire lives judging and condemning others, and now felt the weight of every cruel word they spoke. The scariest thing is that no one forced them to stay there. It was as if they had chosen that place themselves, as if they couldn't accept the love that was always available. Jesus made me understand that this was not a divine punishment, but a natural consequence of living completely disconnected from love. I felt an overwhelming sadness at seeing so many souls lost in their own darkness. Some seemed so absorbed in their own pain that they didn't even realize there was a way out. Others were so used to that darkness that they could no longer even imagine what it would be like to live in the light. I especially remember one lady. She had spent her entire life accumulating wealth and power, stepping on anyone who got in her way. Now she wandered alone, carrying the weight of every person she had hurt, every opportunity for love she had wasted. The saddest thing is that she still clung to the illusion of her own importance, even here, where none of it had any value. Jesus explained to me, without words, that this place existed not as punishment, but as a school, a place where souls could finally see the consequences of their choices. It was a painful process, but necessary for some people to understand the true value of love. And then I understood something fundamental. Hell is not a place God sends us to. It is a state we create for ourselves when we completely reject love. It is the natural result of a life lived only for oneself, without considering others, without opening oneself to the divine. When I thought I couldn't take the darkness any longer, Jesus gently led me to another place. The transition was like stepping out of a dark basement, directly into the most beautiful spring day you could imagine. But this was no ordinary spring. It was something far beyond our earthly understanding. The colors. Oh, the colors. There are no words in our vocabulary to describe them. They were colors I've never seen on earth. More vivid, deeper, more real than anything our human eyes can capture. The air itself seemed to glow, as if every particle was made of pure light. There were gardens of indescribable beauty, with flowers that seemed to sing. Yes, sing. It was music that you didn't hear with your ears, but felt with your whole soul. Rivers of crystal clear water flowed in all directions, but it was not water as we know it. It was as if it were living, shining water, emanating peace and healing. I saw beings that can only be described as angels, but they were not those white-winged figures that we see in paintings. They were beings of pure light, radiant with love and wisdom. They moved in perfect harmony, as if they were part of an extraordinarily beautiful and complex cosmic dance. The most impressive thing was the feeling of belonging. It was as if every part of that place, every flower, every light, every being, was exactly where it should be, in perfect harmony with everything around it. There was no rush, there was no anxiety, there was no fear of the future or regret about the past. There was only the present moment, filled with infinite love. I saw people who had already left, including my parents. They looked so young, so full of life. But it wasn't a physical youth. It was as if their souls had been freed from all weight, from all worry. They smiled with so much love, so much understanding. That's when I understood that death is not an end, but a transformation. Jesus showed me that this place, heaven, paradise, kingdom of light, whatever we want to call it, is not a distant destination we reach after death. It is a reality that already exists, much more real and alive than our material world. It is as if our life on earth is just a pale reflection, a shadow of this greater reality. At that moment, I felt a huge desire to stay. How can we return to our limited reality after experiencing such perfection? It was as if my entire being recognized that place as my true home. But Jesus, with infinite tenderness, reminded me that it was not yet my time, that there was a purpose for my return. It was then that something happened that, even after all this time, still makes me shiver with emotion when I remember it. I felt a presence so powerful, so majestic, that it made the entire heavenly place seem like just a prelude. It was God the Father, and describing this experience is like trying to explain the entire ocean using just a drop of water. I didn't see a physical form. It was more like an infinitely bright light, more intense than 1,000 suns, but miraculously, it didn't hurt to look at. In fact, I don't even know if I was looking, in the sense we know it. It was as if every particle of my being was being enveloped by this presence, as if every atom of my existence was vibrating in response to this indescribable love. Communicating with God was the most intimate and profound experience I have ever had. It wasn't words. It was as if all knowledge, all love, all truth flowed straight into my soul. In a single instant, I understood things that would take several lifetimes to explain. It was as if every question I had ever asked had been answered, not with words, but with an understanding that went beyond human understanding. I felt a love so great, so unconditional, that it made every other kind of love I've ever known seem like just a tiny spark compared to a sun. It was a love that knew every detail of my existence, every mistake, every success, every joy, every pain, and loved me completely, without reservations, without conditions. I discovered that no matter how imperfect or unworthy I considered myself, to him I was perfectly loved. In this presence, I understood that all religions, all the divisions we create here on earth, are just different attempts to understand something that is greater than our capacity to understand. I saw that God doesn't care about labels or denominations. He only sees the heart, only the love we dedicate to each other. It was revealed to me that each person is a unique and precious expression of divine love, regardless of their beliefs or life choices. I saw how we waste time judging each other, when we should be helping each other grow and evolve in love. God's presence showed me that our greatest mission on earth is simply to love God, to love our neighbors, to love ourselves. Not a superficial or conditional love, but a deep and transformative love, which makes us see beyond appearances and touch the divine essence that exists in each being. And then, with infinite kindness, God made me understand that it was time to return. It wasn't words or orders. It was a deep understanding that there was still a purpose for my life on earth. There was more love to be shared, more hearts to be touched. Returning to my body was like diving into ice water, sudden and shocking. At once, all that lightness, that infinite understanding, gave way to physical sensations, the sound of hospital equipment, the smell of antiseptic, the pain in the body. It was like trying to fit into clothes that were too small. The first thing I saw was Tom's face, marked with tears and worry. He held my hand as if his very life depended on it. I later learned that I was missing for almost 7 minutes. For them, these were moments of anguish and fear. For me, it was an eternity of learning and love that no clock could measure. The doctors were impressed with my recovery. They said it was a miracle that I came back without any after effects after so long, without vital signs. They asked questions, wrote down data, compared test results, but how can I explain to them that the true miracle was not being alive, but having experienced something so profound and transformative? In the first few days after the incident, I had difficulty readjusting to normal life. How can you worry about paying bills or everyday commitments again after being in the presence of the divine? The colors seemed duller, the sounds more muffled, as if our world were just a pale shadow of the reality I experienced. Sleeping became a challenge. Every time I closed my eyes, the memories came back with overwhelming intensity. The light, the love, the presence of Jesus and God. Sometimes I woke up crying, not from sadness, but from longing for that state of complete wholeness and love that I experienced. My family noticed the change in me. How not to notice? I was the same person on the outside, but inside I was completely transformed. The things that once worried me so much now seemed so small, so insignificant. On the other hand, simple gestures of love and kindness took on a much greater meaning. At first, I was hesitant to share my experience. I was afraid that people would think I was crazy, or that they would try to convince me that everything was just a hallucination caused by the lack of oxygen in the brain. But little by little, I began to share it with people close to me, those who I realized were truly open to listening. The hardest thing was accepting that I can't completely convey what I experienced. It's like trying to describe the taste of a fruit to someone who has never tasted it. Words always seem insufficient. Still, I feel it's important to share, even if I can only go over a small fraction of what I experienced. It's been a few months since that day in the hospital, and every morning when I wake up, I feel a deep gratitude to be alive. It's not that I didn't feel that way before, but now it's different. Each moment gained a new meaning. Each encounter became a precious opportunity to share love. A lot of people ask me if I'm afraid of death now. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. How can you be afraid after experiencing so much love, so much peace? What I discovered is that I am more afraid of not truly living, of missing opportunities to love and make a difference in the lives of others. My relationship with faith has completely changed. I still go to church, but now it's different. I don't go out of obligation or habit, but because I want to share the love I experienced. Sometimes, when I hear preaching that is very dogmatic or full of judgment, I feel a deep sadness. I wish everyone could understand that God's love is much greater and simpler than our human interpretations. On a daily basis, I try to practice what I learned. Not that it's easy. I'm still human, with all the limitations and flaws. I still get irritated in traffic. I still worry about everyday problems. But now there is a different perspective, a deeper understanding that this is all temporary and that what really matters is the love we share. I have made an effort to be more present in each moment, to really listen when someone speaks to me, to see beyond appearances and touch people's hearts. They're not big gestures. Sometimes it's just a sincere smile, a word of comfort, a moment of true attention. Tom says I'm calmer, more understanding. Our children have noticed that I don't worry about small problems as much as I used to. It's true. After experiencing eternity, many of our daily worries seem to lose their importance, but at the same time, every little moment of love gained infinite value. I didn't found any groups. I didn't write books. I don't give talks. My mission is much simpler and at the same time equally challenging, to live each day with more love and awareness. I share my experience when I feel like someone is truly open to listening, not to convince, but to offer hope and comfort. What I learned, most of all, is that love is the only thing that really matters, not the romantic love in movies, nor the conditional love we often practice, but that pure, unconditional love I experienced on the other side. This is what I try to cultivate and share, even if imperfectly, even if in small gestures.